Welcome to another conversation at NieuwRechts, or for our English listeners, NieuwRechts. I'm happy here to have a conversation with Daniel Deme. Thank you for joining me. Maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit for our listeners.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and hello to all your readers and viewers. I'm Daniel Deme. I'm based in Budapest. I'm Hungarian. I'm editor-in-chief of Online Heute and Hungary Today, two news portals published here in Hungary that sort of introduce the Hungarian life to our foreign readers so that they can get a balanced look into what's happening in Hungary. But I'm a fairly newcomer here in the country. I lived in the United Kingdom for 20 years, so I'm not much rooted in Hungary yet. I don't have those typical traditional ties that people who were born here say.
And what made you decide to move to Hungary then, if it's not where you were born and raised?
Well, I've married a lady from Budapest, and I wanted to bring up my children as Hungarians. I wanted to put them in Hungarian schools, and most importantly, I wanted to understand the values that are the fabric of this society, the traditions, and the language. So it was a logical choice after 20 years to move to Hungary.
And how's it been so far? Are you happy with your decision?
Absolutely. I've never looked back. There's nothing against England or so. It's just this country, for a journalist, it was a feeling like basically for a deep diver coming up to the surface and again taking a deep breath in terms of the freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And after all those years of self-censorship, basically, this was an amazing opportunity to speak my mind according to my best knowledge and my clear conscience. And that is a gift that I do not take for granted any longer. And I'm ready to protect it as well.
I think it's a great point, and it's very undervalued. I think it's also funny because especially in Western countries like the Netherlands, there's this kind of feeling that Hungary actually has big censorship of journalists, but you're now saying the opposite. How would you react to accusations that Hungary is everything but a country that helps freedom of expression?
We don't have any censorship of journalists here, and the censorship has evolved in Europe. It's pretending to be going on in the best interests of readers. It's pretending to be sort of a stopgap against misinformation, disinformation, or propaganda. But it is censorship. We don't have any of that. I am not asked to say things by any of the parties on the political spectrum here in Hungary, and I'm not asked not to say any things. I'm not threatened. I'm saying exactly the way I see it. And we have journalists here, both English speaking and German speaking. And when I hire them, I definitely don't ask them who they are voting for or anything like this. My prerequisite for someone working for us is basically love for Hungary and respect for the Hungarian people. If they're on board with this, they're welcome in our team.
That's amazing to hear. It's amazing that there are still places where there is a lot of freedom of speech. Like you said yourself, this is in Hungary maybe different than it is in other countries in Europe, especially the UK, where you were talking about. But I think there's everywhere this tension. Let's dive maybe into the Hungarian politics then. I think one of the things that people associate Hungary with is the way it handles immigration. And one of the policies that I guess is quite effective is that's reducing illegal immigration by making people apply while being outside of Hungary, and if they enter illegally, that they are deported basically. Why do you think that Hungary chose this when other countries we're quite hesitant to have such a policy?
Well, I think I would make a distinction here governments have chosen to go the other way, but the people, the citizens of Europe, have chosen pretty much the same as did Hungarians. They want control on immigration, and they've been saying that for decades. So we Hungarians, as citizens, are no different to other European people who want to preserve basic freedoms, security, and want to protect the welfare state that they have built for generations. What the difference is that they have governments who do not listen, who want to re-educate them instead of complying with the wishes of the electorate. And the difference here is that we had a government, we still have it, led by Viktor Orban, who had basically has done as he was told by the Hungarian electorate. We said no in 2015 to the mass immigration, and the government had chosen to comply with our wishes. So the problem in the West is that the citizens who want to protect their borders and their sovereignty have been betrayed by both the left and the right, and whatever they choose, whatever they vote for, they are always getting the same. Something that is against the basic principles and tenets of democracy.
Yes, although I feel like it's a little bit changing. For example, with the election in the Netherlands, we have the PVV, the Freedom Party. You're now seeing some other parties like AfD in Germany. Of course, we just had the Austrian situation with their elections. But I agree with you that European people in general at least want less immigration. Depending on who you ask, it depends how much. But I agree that it's refreshing that Hungary is taking this step. But I'm curious, why has it been so effective in Hungary to have this policy?
Well, the technical solution to mass migration and the invasion of borders is very, very simple, as we have proved. We put just in a metaphorical sense, a chicken wire on our southern borders, and a few soldiers and policemen, and that was that. And that was an effective barrier to the mass migration crisis from 2015 and 16. And we were told that it's impossible. That's why we have to sort of accept it as a fact and as a reality of our modern age, that people basically overrun other countries. And lo and behold, we've proven them wrong. We have erected physical barriers, and that was a solution that basically saved Hungary from the same fate as other Western European countries who haven't had the political will to do so. So this is the key: the political will. There are possible effective measures to stop mass migration and protect your own citizens. But if there's no political will and the establishment sort of creates a cartel that is pro-migration from the center to the left and to the right, then there won't be any solution to this, and the obvious physical and technical solutions that there are available for migration will not be used. So I think we made a decision, that Hungarians made a decision that we are not going to be following the path of the rest of the Western European countries. We are going our own way, and I think the time has vindicated our decision, and we are so much better off because of this.
Certainly, I have to agree. I think we see quite a lot of problems. I think you can look at Scandinavian countries like Sweden to see what is happening. Denmark, of course, also chose a different path at some point. But what can other people learn, let's say people in Netherlands or other Western European countries, from the policy in Hungary? What can they do to influence the political will, as you were talking about?
Well, the basic solution is that national interest and national security comes first. And then you can think about the possibility of international solidarity, about helping other people who are perhaps not even fleeing war, but are in difficult economic situation. Hungary's solution to that was basically the slogan and actually the action: bring help to people where they are, not bring their problems here to Europe with them. And I think. The solidarity for other people cannot come to against to the expense of the survival of European cultures, survival of European democracy. This is not a new concept. This you can read this in Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologica, where he speaks about liberalitas. How far should you help others? How far should you show solidarity? And he says to the point where it starts destroying you. And this is the basic concept and the basic idea that should sort of govern all our discussions about solidarity. Your survival and the survival of the community and society that you are responsible for as a leader must come first.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair to say. I do see that there's also tension between, if we're talking about immigration, between Hungary and the European Union now. There's been, of course, this court case where they are kind of forcing with fines to make sure that Hungary changes its position. And it's looking like this pressure is affecting the Hungarian policy. What are your thoughts on the situation between Hungary and the European Union when it comes to migration?
Yes, well, basically the 200 million fine was it was because we didn't want to open our borders to mass migration, and we've deemed the current regulations governing migration in Europe as ineffective and damaging to our society. And instead of reforming this, and there have been many calls for reform, not just from Hungary, they are still forcing nations and forcing people, societies to go along with it. The way Hungary had dealt with this pressure from Europe was by reorienting in a geopolitical terms towards the south, towards the east. The government calls it the Eastern Opening. That's basically an opening of our economies to trade with the Asian and Far Eastern countries. And this is like a safety pressure valve against the blackmail and against the undue influence of Western powers, European Union institutions. It's a safe valve against turning Hungary into what Europe is becoming, a museum of a lost civilization with beautiful medieval towns and cities and buildings, but it's working itself into political and economic irrelevance. So we do not want to end up like this. When in 1980, after 1989, after the fall of the Iron Curtain, all the political parties basically campaigned with the slogan, "Oh, you will be like Sweden, you will be like Germany, you will be like the United States." Try that now; they won't succeed. Well, we don't want to be. We don't want to be like that. We want to preserve our identity and our sovereignty, and we have shown in many instances that we are willing to bring sacrifices towards the preservation of our way of life.
Beautiful. Do you think Hungary can do anything to improve its immigration policy, or do you think it's fine the way it is?
I know it's not. Well, the situation is always evolving. So I think Hungary understands very well that the pressures are growing, and migrants are not coming only from the south now, but they will be coming from the west as well. We have obviously the crisis in Ukraine, and those are genuine refugees, and we have not turned back a single one of them. We have opened our borders and accepted every one of them. So our policies are evolving with the situation, and the government I think it's dedicated to solving the crisis of the day. However, the fact remains that we will not be able to hold the tide forever unless Europe as a whole, and especially our neighbors, change course.
Are you hopeful that this will happen at some point?
It is already happening. It is already happening. Parties who are emphasizing effective measures to combat illegal immigration, mass immigration, are gaining traction in European politics. They are gaining on popularity. They are facing an enormous pushback, and especially in Germany. But I think the will of the people will prevail in the end. People are realizing that they've been lied to. People are realizing that all the predictions about economic growth due to immigration, about no security threats, and obviously a peaceful coexistence with certain cultures, that's been a myth, and it hasn't come true. And people are realizing that they will have to change course in politics and in a radical way.
I agree. I do think, for example, in the Netherlands, that people are starting to lose a little bit of hope. Like we have first a coalition that is actually, I would say, much more strict on the policy for immigration, but they are, especially with negotiation with the European Union, they're falling flat. So I hope that you're right, and it's good to be positive. And I want to turn to like the demographic situation. I think, especially like people like Elon Musk have been very open about it for a long time. That contrary to what some people say, we actually have too few people in some areas, especially in the Western world, with the declining birth rate. And I think it's interesting that Hungary has been, I guess, very open about this. And of course, they had quite a low birth rate of like 1.35 in 2000, but in like almost 25 years, they've been able to increase it to 1.55. So that's quite a lot. Of course, there's still a way to go, but I think the first question I have is, why do you think this is so important in Hungary? Why is Hungary focusing so much on family policy?
Basically, I think it's not a rhetoric. The Christian roots are very, very important and central for our nation, and the basis of the Christian social model is family. It's very hard to explain what the alternative could be, and what we see in the West is there's no other words for it than extinctionist policies, social policies, sweeping societies, and unfortunately, it's resulting in policies that do not motivate higher birth among the indigenous population, and the family is the basic nucleus of a society. And our former president Katalin Novak was a great ambassador for these causes. He joined forces with a documentarist and scientist, Stephen Shaw. Recently, they've created a institution for demographic research. So I think the success we had with social policies and family supporting policies here in Hungary had some intermediate effect, but the solution is not that. I'm not going to go into this, but if your readers are interested in what is going on in terms of our civilization going down in demographic terms, and children not born here, look into what's called Universe 25. It's a research on mice in the University of Texas in 1968-69, which shows the degenerative effects of welfare society on mammals. So it's a very deep-rooted process, and basic economic means and family policies will not save that on its own. There needs to be a changing in culture as such.
And what you're talking about the Christian root, and you're saying that there needs to be a change in culture, but I also remember that Orban has also said that like Hungary itself is also, even though it is like culturally maybe still very Christian, religiously it's also not as Christian, of course, as the past centuries were. So what kind of culture do you think that we need to actually turn things around?
Well, religion and faith is part of it, obviously, but what we've put into our constitution basically is that family consists of a female mother and a male father. And we put that into our constitution, and it's a clear message to everyone that you can feel whatever you like. No one's going to persecute you, but this is not an alternative model to a mother and a father conceiving children in a natural way. So I think culturally we are adopting sort of ideas and thoughts from mostly American universities in an uncritical manner that are very, very hard to explain. They are born in university and academic discussion forums, and are born out of hybrid societies where cultures have mixed, and the mixture, just when you put that together, this doesn't make much sense then. What is important is to have a common ethos, is to have a values that you can rally your entire society around. I've just wrote about China recently and explained it's not that. There's so many of them. It's 1.5 billion. But their strength is in the fact that they are pulling in the same direction. And unless a society that doesn't do that, unless the society doesn't pull in the same direction, and there are no taboos, there are no unquestionable values, a society is doomed to failure.
Yes, I think in general, we in the West, we are more in a meaning crisis. I think this is like a very eloquent way of describing that. Do you think that what kind of policy Hungary has done that maybe other countries, like for example the Netherlands, can learn from to at least improve the birth rates a little bit, or also start thinking together about this cultural change?
Well, Hungary has introduced loans for young families, introduced family policies like maternity leave, and invested a lot in schools. But it's not just what we did, but what we stopped from happening as well. We've actively opposed ideologies entering our schools that are undermining the Hungarian and Christian ethos. We stopped the LGBTQ ideology from gaining space in our education system, in the minds of our children, and other ideologies. There's no cult of abortion in Hungary. It is legal, but we do not take it as the epitome of women's rights. It's a terrible misdefinition. So you need to give and also protect in the same moment when you are trying to strengthen family policies and demographic processes in a society. It's a very complex matter. It's something that Hungary doesn't have a solution for, but Hungary is at least trying, and I think we are giving our best to figure out, rather than saying, oh, it's not a problem, where the solution to demographic problems is immigration. If we are not conceiving enough children here in our country, then we will open our borders simply and let millions and millions of people stream into our societies, and we'll top it up that way. That is the worst possible solution to demographic problems. Unfortunately, that is what we see in Western societies, including the United States.
Yes, it's like the worst of both worlds that you get at the same time.
Exactly.
It's problematic. I want to turn a little bit more to like the geopolitical situation. I think one of the things that has been in the news a lot in Western Europe, revolving around Hungary, is its relationship with China. Of course, China has begun to heavily invest in Hungary, and of course, there's been in more of the Western world, especially in the United States, there's been a very hostile relationship with China. Basically, I guess people are very critical of China when it comes to freedoms in the country. Of course, it has like kind of communist, literally has a communist party that is without a democracy ruling China. So there's a lot of hesitation, I guess, of Western people to work together with China. Why do you think that Hungary has made this, I guess, change of heart and now is working more with Hungary?
Well, as I mentioned before, it's a safety valve for our economy to open ourselves a little bit towards the east as well. But on the one hand, I think that we have in the West, to a certain degree, lost the moral high ground to criticize certain Asian societies and governments for what we see as a behavior incompatible with our democracies. We have censorship. We are trying to ban parties. We are waging a lawfare against political forces that are not in line with radical leftist ideologies, and we are losing the moral high ground to criticize countries like China, for example. So I think. The other thing is that if we think that China is not a democratic country and it's an evil regime, then we should put our money where our mouth is and stop trading with them. What is really ironic is the trade balance between Hungary and China is about $14 billion. Was in 23. And we are criticized by countries like the Netherlands or Dutch politicians or German politicians, Americans. How dare we deal with China? Well, the trade balance, I think, between China and the Netherlands was about 110 billion euros in 23. Germany was well over 200 billion. And of course, the United States, that's been criticizing us for trading with China, is exchanging goods in terms of about 600 billion euros or dollars a year. So it's really funny when they are taking issue with our 14 billion when these numbers are like this. But the problem is not that they think that we shouldn't deal with China because that money is somehow it could be gained with trade with the West. Their problem is that they are losing influence in Hungary because of that, and they can't control us. They know that this is our to an extent a ticket to our sovereignty and independence, to have option B, plan B. We've seen all the sanctions from the United States and the European Union. There are de facto sanctions and the financial pressure against Hungary in past years, and we have found a way out, and that is trade with Asian nations. So and the more we trade with them, the more investment comes from Asia to Hungary, not just China but other countries. The less influence the European Union's institutions have here to control us and blackmail us and push us against the wall.
Let me push you a little bit back on that. I'm curious. Wouldn't you like if you look at China's model, for example, in African countries, is they invest heavily and then they also buy influence. So you could say you're trading one influence or one mode of pressure for another one. So aren't you afraid that China will also be able to have similar pressure later on Hungary that now maybe Europe or United States have?
If you look at into China's investment in Africa and Asia, in many cases they've lost a lot of money, and of course trade is always influenced, but it's mutual. You know, and not just China, but we also have our say in certain issues when we deal with China, because they are heavily invested in these countries. So we are trading. Obviously, these are superpowers, Russia and the United States and China, and they are behaving like superpowers. But one thing is well, that's my personal opinion. Is although China's political regime is very different from our European ones, they are not proselytizing. In terms of politics, which means that they are not requiring us to adopt their political vision for the world and for societies. They are keen on doing business. Now, of course, there's a right way and there's a wrong way of dealing with China, but that obviously applies to the United States as well. We've seen. The enthusiasm has waned a little bit in European nations dealing with the United States, because the influence they have brought with the trade, the political and cultural influence, was not deemed as positive in every instance. And as the United States is changing and it's shifting to the radical left, it's losing its soft power. To a large extent, and they are substituting soft power with hard one in many cases. So not just China or the United States, but any trade relation, it must be followed by smart and planned systemic foreign policy.
I do agree with you there. I also want to go back to the point that you said. That we're losing our moral high ground as the Western world. I kind of agree with that, but I still do think that we are, let's compare, for example, our country to Afghanistan or some other countries in the world, that we still have some right to at least prefer our state to theirs. But also you could say, maybe, yes, we made a lot of mistakes in the West, but wouldn't you also be able to argue that then working together with another, let's just say mildly less than ideal political situation in China, that this could be one of those extra mistakes that we will look back on in the future as being one of our moral mistakes?
We'll see where it takes us, but I think Hungary is playing a very small, insignificant part in China's rise and rise into a superpower. The success of the Chinese economy and the Chinese model has been granted by no other power than the United States. Trillions and trillions of dollars in trade and exports to the United States is what has given rise to the Chinese miracle, if we can call it that way. So although we are looking into our consciences very hard in Hungary, I think we are going to have very little say in the rise or fall, God forbid, of China. As far as I'm concerned, I've seen China. I've been there and spoken to Chinese officials, and I've asked them very difficult questions about sovereignty, etc. The impression I'm having is what makes the Chinese tick is not sort of geopolitical control or spreading a certain ideology. No. What makes them tick is trade, business. That's what they want. They want to compete with us, and they want to beat us. And who can blame for them? They want the best for their societies.
Of course. Do you think that other European countries will like follow the line of Hungary and maybe will do more trades with China in the future?
You know what? I've been looking into Chinese business and Chinese politics, and there's a mile-long queue of people trying to do more business with China. They are stampeding like wildebeest in Africa during migration to get to China and to convince the Chinese to make so much more investment in their own countries. It's what really bugs me is the hypocrisy of certain powers of criticizing not just Hungary but other nations, especially Central and Eastern European nations, of opening their economies to China. Is when you go to a trade show somewhere in Shanghai or Beijing or anywhere else, there'll be a line of booths of German, French, Swiss companies in those trade shows. So this rhetoric about Hungary should really be careful, etc., and should reorient itself towards the West is basically gobbledygook. It's hypocrisy, and it's not in the best interest of our country.
That's a fair point. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, another point that people criticize Hungary for, that is its relationship with Russia. Of course, since the war in Ukraine, the tension within Europe and with Russia has seen like a Cold War status again. I think that Orban said that they're kind of neutral in the situation. Of course, they don't want to directly help Ukraine in its military operations against Russia. And first of all, I'm curious, what do average people in Hungary think of the situation with Russia and Ukraine?
I think the first and foremost concern that Hungarians have towards the war in Ukraine is they want to make sure that it doesn't spread westward, that is towards us. We neighbor Ukraine, and the war is affecting us immensely. We get 10 to 15,000 Ukrainian refugees crossing our borders from Ukraine every single day. Every single day. They are offered accommodation, they are offered food, and those who want to stay in Hungary are welcome to do so. We have opened schools for them. We have opened refugee centers, and we've opened our job market for Ukrainians. And what we return back to the beginning is that every leadership must first and foremost follow the national interest and national security. And I think this is what the government has done. I don't think this is a perfect solution. I think you can find a certain moral ambiguity in the Hungarian decision, but you can find the same in the position of Western countries. I think the greatest joke is when Western countries present the case of weapons shipments and military support to Ukraine as the solution that doesn't have a price, doesn't have consequences, and it's a clearly 100% positive moral decision. It's a nonsense. It's a nonsense. The problem is that we only have morally ambiguous options now in Europe towards Russia and Ukraine, and the problem is and the question is really how did we get here? How did we get here that we only have bad and morally questionable options presented to us in terms of solving the crisis in Ukraine? So I think most of Hungarians, just to answer your questions, would see the negotiated ceasefire and the peace solution as the way forward, rather than stuffing Ukraine with more and more weapons and sending their people to the front. Whether this is the right or wrong solution, time will maybe tell. But I would really argue with people who would think that this is an illegitimate option. calling for a ceasefire, calling for peace negotiations is illegitimate and is against the principles of European values and European society, solidarity. That's a nonsense. This is one of the legitimate discussion points in terms of speaking about solving the war in Ukraine.
I think that is fair, although I would say that I guess the moral problem for most people is that like they accept Ukraine as a sovereign nation, and that nation was attacked by Russia. So I think most people would not even argue with you that indeed there is a huge cost to helping Ukraine. I think look at Germany, for example, and its economy is going down very fast. Same goes for, I guess, all countries in Europe, especially in Western Europe. But I think when you talk about statehood and about the importance of nations, I think this is where most people draw the line in the situation with Russia.
Well, there's no one disputes that, and Hungary had obviously condemned the invasion, and there's no doubt about it that this is a morally deplorable action by Russia. The problem comes when you equate peace with justice.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot do that. You will not achieve peace, and you will not achieve the end to an industrial scale of killing until you do that. The notion that we can only have peace negotiations and a peace process in Ukraine once all the territories have been taken back, once Crimea is back in Ukrainian hands, once Russia had made reparations and the Russian leadership is in The Hague in front of a war tribunal, that notion will only push the war further and push Ukraine more into crisis. No, the peace process and peace negotiations might not actually restore justice in the classical terms in Ukraine. That's true. That's for true. But it may stop the massive scale of killing that is going on and the massive destruction of Ukraine's towns and infrastructure. And that is a price that may be worth paying. That is solely for the Ukrainian people to decide, not for me.
That's a good point. I agree that most people do think that they have more of a say in the situation than the Ukrainian people themselves. So I think that's a good point to go to the next topic. We already talked a little bit about it, but there's a lot of tension in the relationship with the European Union in Hungary. Although on the conservative and the right-wing side, I think people look up to Hungary as like kind of a country with more sanity and the inspiration of what can happen in their own countries. What do you see nowadays about the relation between Hungary and the European Union that is maybe shifting a little bit?
Well, the European Union, in terms of if you break it down to member states and nations and governments, I think the relations are really good. Trade is going up, tourism is going up both ways. We are traveling there. More and more people are coming here. So I don't see any major issues on a national level. When it comes to the European Union as an institution and its institutions in Brussels, Strasbourg, then the situation is different. The constant efforts to federalize Europe into a European superstate, the green fundamentalism, and especially the broken European migration policies have pushed Hungary to take its own route, and the Brussels European bureaucracy doesn't like it happening. It doesn't like that a small country like Hungary is taking a different direction and is acting as a sovereign country. And the problem is not basically that a small 10 million country is going in its own way. They could handle that. The problem they have is that we are showing an example and inspiring other nations to do so, showing them that there is an alternative, and we still have the right and indeed sometimes a duty to say no to these efforts. So Hungary had shown its middle finger to the Brussels bureaucrats and gone its own way, while keeping absolutely friendly relations to neighbors and other European nations. And that's the important bit.
Do you think that Hungary can play like a bigger role in like basically helping more European politics to shift a little bit more into the right-wing area?
Well, the way I see it, I've come from the West. I've come from the United Kingdom and moved to Hungary, and that made me realize that Hungary is basically the last domino standing in Western Europe in terms of common sense, of geopolitics and of national survival and obviously sovereignty. And that really worries the federalist and globalist elites, because they clearly see that other people other nations and other governments are inspired by the Hungarian position. Our European friends are learning their lessons the hard way. This extinction level naivety that characterized Europe in 2015 during the migration crisis is evaporating slowly. And obviously, not just the European conservative scene, but even in the United States, you see American politicians, from Trump to his vice president candidate, J.D. Vance, learning from Hungary, communicating with the Hungarian conservative ecosphere, and getting inspired and advised by them. So, although we are a very small nation, we are punching above our weight in terms of offering an alternative narrative to the Western one that emphasizes migration. And it's an amazing feeling, to be honest with you. It's uplifting. And I'm talking to a lot of journalists and talking to politicians and opinion makers in the West who want to know what the secret of Hungary is in finding this courage to go against the mainstream. On a government level, it's very simple. Everyone's asking, how come Orban has been re-elected for the fifth time, 4 times in a row? And well, just do what the people tell you to do. Don't try to re-educate them. Don't try to convince them they're wrong. Don't try to belittle them. Do what the populace, what the electorate is telling you. So I think Hungary has become, it's a big word, but we've become like Noah's Ark for common sense in Europe, and hopefully the levels of the waters will subside and the common sense will disembark from our little ark and spread in Europe. But we are a small nation, and we probably cannot resist much longer. We cannot resist indefinitely. They still have the power to break us economically and politically. So we are just hoping and praying that other nations will see the light and snap out of their policies in terms of migration and ecological disaster policies.
I agree. I think one of the big turning points will be the American election. You already talked a little bit about Trump. In the polls, it's kind of very close. So of course we don't know at this point what will happen. What do you think that elections will mean for the relationship between the United States and Hungary?
Well, despite the bullying that came from the Joe Biden administration in the past years, relations, cultural exchange, and education exchange, and trade relations were good with the United States. However, the United States is being overtaken by China in terms of the investment in Hungary. But obviously, if Kamala Harris should win the elections in November, then this will raise the bar, and this will mean a new level of bullying from the United States radical leftist White House. This would be a huge problem for Hungary. But there's obviously the other option. If Donald Trump wins, we don't think it's going to result in some sort of a golden age for us or miracles, but it would definitely ease the pressure. And I think most Hungarians' main hopes towards a Trump administration would be to end the forever war in Ukraine. That would be the priority, and that would be our number one on our wish list towards a new White House. If Kamala Harris should win, well, the government had declared what they call economic neutrality, and means we will not take part in the disputes and fights between geopolitical blocs in the world, and we reserve the rights to trade with all sides of the geopolitical fight. And that is the way we are going to pursue whoever is going to win the seat in the White House. So I think most Hungarians are aware of the fact that the relations with the United States are crucial for Hungary, and we need to focus on a positive relationship. If there are no buyers there in Washington, well, that's too bad. We'll deal with the United States on a different level. But there's no anti-Americanism in Hungary, apart from a few individual cases, and most Hungarians want to strive for very positive and close relationships with the United States, and there's no doubt about that.
Thank you so much. I think our readers and listeners have a much better idea now about the situation in Hungary. Thank you so much for your time. If people want to read more about Hungary, of course, at Hungary Today, where could they do this?
On the internet, it's free. It's coming out every day, Hungary Today. And if you speak German, Ungarn heute, the German version is surprisingly read by even more people than the English version. So I guess Germans read the things that they can't read about.
Thank you so much. And also thank you to our listeners and readers. If you want to hear more of our international conversations, please let us know. And if you want to support us at NieuwRechts, then you can subscribe to our website and to our social media. Thank you very much and wishing you a great day. This was Daniel de Liever.